maybe God's blessed one of us here extremely financially, and what are we doing with that? And maybe one of God's entrusted us with several people. What are we doing with that? And it just, I think it all just interconnects together. Of, I don't think it is about money, the talents or money, but
only on the surface level, I think.
And talent was a lot. Talent was a lot then.
20 years worth of labor.
20 years worth of labor. I mean, that's like, that's a lot.
And for them, and for those other guys to double their amount of money, I mean, that's impressive.
Talent is 20 years, so one guy had 100 years worth of labor, and he doubled it to 200 years. So
I can't remember what I figured it up when I did one of these things in Sunday school, kind of how much money. Well, it was the one with the wicked the king that forgave the huge debt and all that stuff. Just how much money that was, and it's still a lot. Yeah. 200 years worth of labor.
Yeah. That's a lot.
When the last servant took the one in the hand is better than two in the bush approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like verse 27, the guy says he would have been okay even if he would have just invested in just the bank to return on just the interest. Instead, though, he buried it in the ground where there's no investment at all.
I feel like this is like Dave Ramsey's chapter right here. Like, seriously, Dave Ramsey's like, look, people, you just bury it. You don't get anything back on it. Why don't you put it in this savings bond?
Yeah,
he wouldn't. Mutual fund. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, it's.
What do you think about this? You had three different servants, and you had two of them had enough confidence to invest the money, and the third one. So you actually had three different personalities here that we were dealing with too in this chapter, where the third one caved.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we talked about not long ago about different people in the church. You have different talents, and why do they not produce with those talents? And they keep them to themselves. Just like I was telling you, the guy told me, he said, well, why would I tell the church what kind of talents I have or what kind of spiritual gift do I have? Then they'd want me to do something about it.
Yeah, because then you're held accountable.
Right.
The second your spiritual gift is revealed, you are now held accountable. So What's the best thing to do? Is continue to bury that spiritual talent and just keep hiding it. And that's so often what we do in the church. And then on the other hand, we as a church can be guilty of not allowing people to expose their spiritual gift.
Well, I figure being scrutinized, but there was three different personalities that we're dealing with too. And there's some of us that, what would I do if I was given the money? My personality, what would I do? And I think we ask ourselves that. I think if you do a self-assessment, put ourselves in the shoes of these servants and say, here, Logan, here's you 5 bags of silver. What would Logan do with it?
I think
you knew I was harsh, and when I don't know.
I think the point is we all have some point of some amount of money, so to speak, metaphorically. We all have a talent to use, but we're afraid that we have a hard master that we will fail, or there is no negative investment here. We're guaranteed success as long as we're investing and working for the Lord. People don't think that way. We think of, I'm going to fail, or I don't actually see tangible results, but we don't know, what kind of results we're going to have 100 years down the road. But as long as we're investing and engaging, since those are the buzzwords, we will not return positive values. And so the master will be pleased regardless, but you have to act on those.
Yeah, that's important. And then, we might not see some of our return until final judgment. Separate the sheep from the goats, And you just don't know. You just don't know what that's going to bring about. Come on, son of a preach it. And we can celebrate fruit through coffee talk because like I was texting with a former Coffee Talk member. I guess he would still be considered part of Coffee Talk, but especially when he's in town. But we had the ability to take him through Not a Fan. He then takes his now girlfriend through Not a Fan, who then, in turn, she takes her sister through Not a Fan, and her sister now is leading a small group of 10 plus girls going through Not a Fan. You know? So, and, you know, it's pretty cool to see that, but we're not always guaranteed to see the results either. You know? What's going to be birthed out of that little small group up there, you know? It just keeps affecting more and more people, and that's what it's about.
It's about planting the garden and then not reaping, which is
Yeah, and I mean the final judgment. I think this all goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Obviously, Scripture interprets Scripture, and Scripture all relates because it all is part of one big story. But you know, there's going to be those people who sat there and buried their talent. And
so look,
how many times do we see people hungry? How many times do we see people thirsty? How many times do we see people maybe figuratively naked? Okay, you know.
maybe physically.
Maybe physically naked, you know. There was one girl in D.C. when we drove in a number of years ago. She dropped her drawers and moons. I thought about dropping my drawers and giving her my pants. She wouldn't do that anymore. But, you know, that's how you know, we see these people, and how often do we actually see the need and refuse to meet it?
How often are we stubborn to refuse to meet it too? Like, oh well, I'm not going to give the money to him. He's just going to go spend it on alcohol. That's not. I mean, like that. You hear that more times from people about, like, you'll see somebody on the side of the road, and there'll be times like people I know that I'm really close with will be like, "Don't give them money. They're just going to go buy alcohol." It's like, why? Why are you judging them on whether or not? If you don't want them to do that, then give them something other than money. Give them something that'll benefit them.
Yeah.
But and it's like the this is water thing. We were watching. Like, a lot of people automatically assume that because that person's on this side of the road holding up a sign, it's their fault that they're there. They probably just were stupid and dropped out of school and didn't do this and do that. And you don't know that. You don't know if that guy's the father of like 4 or 5 kids and just lost his job because of budget cuts, and now only way that they have to make money is to stand on the side of the road and beg. I mean, no one wants to beg for money.
Oh yeah, panhandling.
Yeah.
But
Professional panhandler.
You do, but how many? Like, I just want to ask the people who say that. So, have y'all built a relationship? Like, you know that
guy?
person's past, like, completely, you know, year in, year out, because you have sat on the side of the road and talked to that person. So, why is our first assumption, you know, obviously because there are people who break the mold and are going out and using it for that, but is our calling to determine that? You know, we are not allowed. We are not allowed. How can we as people judge people according to biblical standards who don't even believe in the Bible?
Right.
What are we first and foremost called to do? Show them the love of Christ. Once they see the love of Christ and once they trust in the love of Christ, then they obviously are held to the biblical standard. But our first and foremost thing is to show them the love of Christ, and it's what Jesus did to every single person he encountered, from the 10 lepers, you know, to Matthew the tax collector, to blind Bartimaeus, to the guy at the pool of Bethesda, you know, on and on and on. Jesus met them where they were, the woman at the well, loved them, didn't hold them to a biblical standard. Just the only standard he held them is that it was about sin, you know? And once he exposed their sin, he said, this is what it's about. Come and follow me. I'm going to make you this, okay? You're not already this, but I'm going to make you this. And the transformation takes place. And once the transformation begins to take place, you know, obviously more is put upon us.
I don't know, it's just hard for me to believe that someone has the heart of Christ and then thinks that about individuals like that. But our society so deeply, it roots in us to just think the worst of people. we went from a society of innocent till proven guilty to a society of guilty until proven innocent.
Judgmental nature.
Skeptical.
Yeah.
That's like I was getting off the interstate there at Corden one time, and I knew it. I knew it, and I'd seen it coming for a long time. But the economy, the way it was there was a guy on the side of the road said homeless American veterinarian, and I just knew. I knew there was just a matter of time before those folks were affected too. You know.
Yeah.
It's sad that he had to put on his sign. Listen, I'm not just some bum.
I'm a homeless veterinarian.
I've fallen on hard times. That's how judgmental as a society we've become.
That was a joke. It spelled veteran wrong.
Yeah. That
Well,
is.
we're always going to have the poor. Jesus told us that. But you know, there's smart ways of dealing with it, and then there's poor, foolish ways of dealing with things. And I think Will's right. You know, you have to engage with people. It's so much easier to just here's $10, here's $20, go buy something. Instead of talk to people and get to know them.
A huge debate one night during a Wednesday night service, and I was actually talking about how should you react when you see a guy standing at the intersection there at Kroger's and holding a sign wanting money. And I told him the story about my wife. She worked there on the drugstore, and there was a guy standing out there. Well, it touched her heart to where she walked out of the store, went out there, gave this guy $20. Okay, so I showed up, and I said, she's telling me what she did. And I said, you gave him $20? And she said, yeah. I said, well, what are you going to do when you see him coming out of the liquor store? Mm-hmm. And of course, we debated that back and forth. So I was going through this on a Wednesday night service and got in a big debate about should you help those people and say, okay, I gave you $20, Will, whatever you do with it now, that's your problem. And I explained to the folks that it's not quite that simple, because God expects us to be good stewards of what he gives us too. Mm-hmm. And to just give it away frugally like that, not to get nothing in return or to have, just to be given it and then saying, well, if he goes and buys alcohol, it's on him. I think it's deeper than that. And when you think about this, you know, each one of these guys were expected to be good stewards of what they were given too.
Yeah.
And I think you got to discern before you just automatically say, oh, well, here's $10, here's $5, here's $20. Here. I mean, I don't know that we're expected to be that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, discernment I think is very important. I mean, because if you walk down, say you go to St. Louis, you're going to see homeless people everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't just, and that's not doing anything.
Right.
You have to support society that does things to help these people. But at the same time, you have to, when we went to Louisville and watched the Bats game, me and Keisha got out of the car, and there's this guy walking down the street, and we watched him reach into the trash can, pull out a bag of chips, and start eating from it. And I stopped and said, are you hungry? And he said, yeah, man. And so I gave him money.
Right.
There's obvious times for discernment, but then we're stewards. If you drive by Kroger and see the same guy every Friday night holding a sign that says, hey, I'm hungry, you got to think.
Right.
You can't just give.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, everything has discernment in it, and so often what it is our mindset is not so much to see the need that's in front of us. We won't walk by and look at a guy and say, well, all we'll say is, okay, he's a drunk or he's a drug addict, and I'm not going to support his habit. Instead of looking at him and saying, man, it's awfully cold out here and he don't have a jacket. Or, you know, he had holes in his socks where it looks like he didn't have any shoes. When we could just simply say, here's my shoes, you know? Here's what it is. Here's, you know, that's just, I think that's, there is discernment there. We are called to be good stewards, and a lot of times we'll either use a completely judgmental attitude or we'll use a completely non-stewardship attitude toward
Well,
it
it's
all.
just like the last guy. You know, the last guy, he's the guy who stopped at the stoplight and said, here's $5. And he felt good about what he did when he drove off, you know. But and in reality, that wasn't what it was about at all. wasn't about giving